Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. Today's webinar is part of our Innovation in Banking series. The series will cover relevant topics around digital transformation and the technological innovation in banking driving it. The customer experience at your bank is paramount to its ability to attract, retain, and grow its customer base. So in this webinar, we will explore some of the best practices to follow when implementing digital account opening at your bank. Well, today's speaker will be Chuck Wakocha. He's leading the banking solutions team here at ProcessMaker. He is a thought leader and brings over 10 plus years of experience in fintech. Now, a bit about ProcessMaker. ProcessMaker is an award-winning low code, no code solutions provider with a set of solutions focused on community banking and account opening. It is extremely rewarding to know that the meticulous development of tools and solutions that ProcessMaker has developed is recognized by those who we serve, such as Best Digital Process Automation Solution and Design Workflow Management System of the Year. Among the highlights in the numerous awards are easiest to use, easiest to set up, and users most likely to recommend. At ProcessMaker, we have an obsessive focus on serving the customer, you, the financial institutions. So our mission is to make it easy to automate complex business processes, and that starts and ends with you in mind. Should you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A section during Chuck's discussion, and we will answer them following the event. Now, here we go. Here's Chuck, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. As I look at those awards, it really dovetails into what we're going to be talking about today. And again, in those highlights, easiest to use, easiest to set up, and users most likely to recommend. I think those things really underpin when you think about what best practices are for providing digital account opening, right? You have to take into consideration what the experience will be for our two customers, right? Customers on two ends of that. That is the banks who are implementing this. And of course, the solution itself ultimately serves the end user, which is the bank's customers. So that easiest to use really talks about those customers first and foremost, right? This is really takes a hyper focus on that user experience. And pretty much that should be the starting point for what you consider, not only in the development, in the design, and every point through the user experience, user's journey. And then, of course, that easiest to set up, that it then is talking about how the banks put this into play, right? You have a great tool, a very robust and a mechanism for customers to open up an account, but it should not be so cumbersome that they can't get it up and running and to utilize it. And then, of course, on both ends of that is users most likely to recommend. From the customer side, that's telling other folks about, this bank that I'm using. This is why I like them. This is, where I go. This is where I spend my time. And then, of course, the banks who are using this, talking to your colleagues, talk to other folks who are looking to put this type of tool into play. Those things happen on both ends. And at ProcessMaker, we are obsessively focused on serving our customers. And that, again, is both ends of those customers, you as bank and the end users, the customers of the banks. So when we think about account opening in 2022, right, account opening is the most critical process for banks, right, to acquire new customers as well as deepen the relationship that they have with their current customers, right? So as we move into this, not only the advance in technology driving the digital transformation, but also the acceleration that was provided by the pandemic over the last few years, it was really necessitated to a much greater degree the criticality of having a good digital account opening. And so when you're putting into play, most institutions are thinking of this as translating their physical experience into the digital world. But you have to take a step back and think about this. There are things that you can drive more efficiently and you can drive more, a better experience than what you would even have in a physical meeting, right? You can take those best things, those best practices that you get from a physical experience. You still want to convey that warmth and that engagement, that understanding of the customer, but driving it from a digital experience where it is moving fast. So as I've been thinking about this, I've really looked at the various institutions and their, I guess, their attempts, their processes to implement the account openings. And so relative to each particular institutions, I've noticed some areas that need some improvement. And so rather than nitpick at various areas that can be improved or going to institution saying this is the best way to do it. That reminds me of my consulting days where, that was how I'd make money. I would spend the time say these are ways to go at it. And then for each institution, we, dissect what they're doing, how they're doing, and ways to improve it. The results of that consultation and the recommendations that will come from that ultimately follow the same guiding principles. And so as we think about what those guiding principles, those end up becoming the best practices for providing digital account opening at your bank, the topic that we are here today to talk about. So those guidelines really fall into four main areas, and we'll dive in through those and dig into what those actually mean. Obviously, there's some overlap as you look at those, but they should be taken, I guess, individually as a subject area to kind of plug in at. Now, if you have questions, I encourage you to use the chat box or use the Q&A feature to write those questions down. We will at the end take some time to dive into some of those questions. I can't assume that I've thought of everything or that I will be able to consider the many things that you guys will be thinking about or considering for your institutions as well. So those primary guidelines. First, the digital experience is the primary experience. This is the age we're living in, right? This is, the advance has moved from the agrarian life to an industrial life. We've moved from internet 1.0 well past web 2.0 here. And the digital experience is the first and primary engagement that most people have at your banks, right? If you think about how that's moving in the greater picture, this is what formerly Facebook is looking at and hoping to really corner with the move to Meta, right? This is the digital experience. That is a harbinger of where things are going. Second area, functionality. This almost seems like it's the base expectation. Functionality should be flawless, right? And that means when I key this button, when I click this, the expected outcome should be rendered, right? If I move here, this is what should happen. And when I've been in product development, I would rather delay a release to make sure that we have as few bugs as possible, or make sure that the functionality is fully fleshed out, than to try to push something forward and have a problem, in that. We'll talk a little bit more about that again and why that matters. And then aesthetics and functionality are not the same thing, right? There's what we see and how we experience it, and then there's what we do and how we experience that. And if you ask me, obviously from the previous one, functionality matters more than aesthetics. My wife may tell you something, differently, that you need to have them on the same level. But from a tech standpoint, functionality is paramount. I can improve aesthetics. I can redesign the user interface. You often see that regularly, but what's happening behind that functionality that needs to be done. And so they're not the same thing. Now, that doesn't reduce the importance of the aesthetics. That needs to be done, but consider those as separate things. And then just as importantly, communicating to the customer. This has different layers to this, where we, um, the expectations that we set for the customer, understanding what their expectations are to begin with, right? And how we communicate to that. It's important to be able to drive that. And I think there's a common phrase that says that the number one determinant of disappointment is expectations, right? So if you have good expectations and they're not met, that is, leads to immediate disappointment. So our customers are fairly sophisticated now. They're digitally savvy and they have expectations of what the functionality should be, how things should look like. And through that process, this is a way to make sure and manage that. And in driving that primary experience, this as your first step in reaching the customer, a new customer, you will need to communicate. This is how you build a relationship with them. So the digital experience as the primary experience. In looking at this, there's a couple of things that you'll see just in this slide deck to begin with. And this goes to those guiding principles. It's very clean, very simple. I've had and done for some of those, some of the folks who have attended previous webinars, I've had images and slides that are very busy or that have a lot of things in it trying to convey a lot of information. In that, you can get lost in that. Sometimes we think having more choice is preferred, but we want to have a simple experience in what I expect and what is delivered align very well. So that digital experience as the primary experience for the customer, this is where they start. This is how they initially experience the bank, right? I do this for any and everything that I'm looking at now. If I'm looking to go, buy food, I am checking out the grocery stores around. I am looking at the digital experience. If I am looking to order food from a restaurant, same thing. If I'm looking to go get my car service, it's all in the website. It's all in the mobile experience. So making sure that those things are done very well. This is the area that you should focus on. A lot of institutions now, I mentioned earlier, are thinking about what does my in-person experience look like and how do I convey that? I think that becomes trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, right? You're looking at an old model. The in-person experience is now becoming antiquated. The in-person experience, I think now should be a sub to the digital experience. Again, before I go to the grocery store, I've looked at it on my mobile phone, on the website. So when I get there, I'm actually expecting an extension of what I saw digitally. I don't go there first and then come back and look at the website, right? So the primary experience should be the digital experience. And when you then get to the in-person, or if that actually happens, obviously in many cases it doesn't, how does that reflect what I saw, what I experienced digitally? So as you're thinking this as a guiding principle, reconsider the way you were looking at it. If you were considering the in-person experience and trying to translate that, wipe the board clean. Start afresh from considering what the primary experience is, and that's the digital one. Build that out. Make sure that it is where it needs to be, and then work on having your in-person experience, supplement that and be reflective of what that is. The banks that still use a lot of paper marketing, I think that is not necessarily a good use of a marketing budget. Focus on the digital experience. That's what people are looking at. Even if they get a paper collateral in the mail, they'll look at it, and the first thing they'll do is they'll go to the website on your mobile, on your phone, because that's what's driving them anyway. So want to use a couple examples here, for those, rather than pick on the banks that we'll work with, I wanted to pick on the big ones, right? The Chases of the world. When I go to that, I think about what are the things that this bank wants me to do? What are the activities that I am here to accomplish? And how is the bank driving me towards that end? In this here, just looking at the Chase page here, the direction that they want me to go in. Obviously, if I'm an existing customer, that should be easy and prominent for me to move on. But as a new customer, I need to be able to understand what I'm looking for, which is a checking account, and how I can easily move to that, or how I can make my decision in that. And so I think they've done a good job here. This is where they want you to go to. In the Western world, we read left to right. So they're putting the prominent thing here, the most popular. They're highlighting this as a way to push me in that direction. You know, the monthly service fee is something that I really don't care for, but then they make it easy for me to see how I can waive those fees, right? In this one, in the secure banking, there's no option to waive those fees. And I would assume that in the premier checking, it would probably require something higher in terms of balance or activities in that. But these are the things that I am looking for, and makes it easy for me to get started. And that's open now. I don't need to go from here into multiple pages to get to that action. I need to be able to have it immediately accessible. I move on to Bank of America. Similarly, if you can see here, one of the things that I think is not done well here is the use of color, right? I think they do a good job with the layout. Again, very clean, is driving the information here. But I also don't see them prompting me in a particular direction, where Chase would have, created a different color, or to something that drew my attention to the action I want, to the action they want me to perform. Bank of America hasn't quite done that here. And if the no overdraft fees is a differentiator for this, it needs to be a little bit more prominent, or it needs to, maybe put a yellow star, a blue star, that this is the kind of thing that I want to go in there, right? So this is the direction that they want me to go. This is Wells Fargo, right? So I think compared to Chase and then to Bank of America, their use of pictures, make it feel a little bit warm, but I think it's a little bit too busy as well, right? So they can reduce the imagery on here, and they can also reduce the wording that they have on here, how to avoid this, right? If you look back at this, no overdraft fees or waive fees, that's a lot simpler than this. So concept in here is thinking about the digital experience. You need to look at it at every point in this, the use of white space, the number of images that I have, the way that things are laid out. So start with that and consider, as a digital experience, this is the way I need it to go. So moving on to the next guiding principle, functionality. It should be flawless. Recently went to an event where there was some cake involved, right? And the cake had fondant, frosting. And for those who may or may not know what frosting, the fondant frosting is, it's the ones where they can really do some cool things on it, and they make it look really nice. But fondant doesn't taste very good. It doesn't taste as good as the cream cheese frosting, but it looks nice. And once I cut into the cake, it looked nice, but it tasted terrible. I didn't go farther than a bite, so I put it aside, because what was inside, the content was not very good. So no matter how good it looks, once I get in and the content is no good, I'm gone. I'm done there. And for institutions, trying to put this into play, we really only get one chance, one shot at this. You're not going to have someone come back and say, oh, they screwed it up last time, I'm going to come back. Instead, they're going to go, and they're not coming back. And then they'll tell other people, this place, had problems, or this place had issues. They're not very good. And so it's important to make sure that the functionality is flawless. And as it pertains to account opening, and especially, with the items that are in there, on the back end, there are a number of things that are going on. And that is the request of information, the gathering of the documents to support this. The selection of products and services, the acceptance of disclosures, and the e-signatures. And what's happening behind it is an orchestration of various tools to accomplish this on the back end, so that as for the user, this is a streamlined and seamless process. So sitting in this and imagining, if we go back to this process here, once I click on open an account, it will ask me for some information. I will put that in. I will supply, the validating information, my social security number, my EIN number, TIN number, any of those validation points here. And these things are being orchestrated in a process and typically being managed by another tool or a third-party provider in those. For the customer, that should not be a concern, right? I need to be able to go through this without any bumps, without any hiccups, and go through this. So on the back end of it, the best practice for the institution is to spend the time to identify all the various points in this process, in this workflow, because the functionality ultimately will determine the success or failure of this process. So making sure that the client experience, is a superior experience, making sure that each of these points are done. In a previous webinar, we talked about the integration of these various pieces, and that from a compliance, from a process standpoint, integration, it is looking at those various third-party providers and services that need to be connected. So plugging in the information from the core, if it's an existing customer to start, or at the end of it, boarding to the core once we've onboarded a new customer. But the gathering of information, the submission on the background check tools that we have, the supplying of the documentation for compliance, the e-signatures that are embedded. And what this should look like is a very smooth process for the customer. It should be embedded in your website. We do not, as a customer, I don't think anyone likes to be redirected, right? So I start here, and then I have to open up another, a pop-up, or I go to another page. You are leaving this page, and not only does that make me feel insecure that I am leaving the trusted website of the institution, right? I came here, now you're telling me I have to go out the side door to this other area to complete this process. That brings down the customer experience, right? So consolidating this workflow into a seamless and frictionless process is what is done on the back end. And so, in the previous webinars, we talked about best practices with APIs and integrations. We have links to that webinar if you want to check that out and look a little bit further. But in this, I need to be able to go from start to finish, having the options that I need to go in this. For example, at the in the funding, as I go through, I've completed the application, I've signed it, the background checks have been run, the review has been done, whether it's auto approved or it requires a manual intervention and someone to review. And I've gotten a notification that says this account is ready to go and I can fund it. Now, how am I going to fund, right? Making sure that the customer has the proper choice and mechanisms to do that. And one of the things you see now more often is tools like PayPal being integrated to utilize the credit cards. Stripe does the same thing. Zelle being able to transfer from one institution to the other or move funds easily. Those are the benefits of having tools like Plaid and Dwala. Those tools that can authenticate who I am and verify my identity, but also allow me to easily move funds from one platform to the other, or one area to the other. For more complexity, where there's a loan engagement, a loan origination, integrating with tools with the banking software, such as our partners with Abrigo allows that same process. If I've gone through and opened up a deposit account, I can easily move into a loan application, or if I've started and completed a loan application and moving into opening a deposit application, it should not be, again, being redirected. I should be able to seamlessly flow from those to the other. And so those are, again, among the things in the best practices for the functionality. Now, we looked at the aesthetics a little bit on those pages for Chase, for Wells Fargo, for Bank of America, for Capital One. And, this is a way, aesthetics for a way to show personality, right? So in this institution, we all have our personality, i.e. our culture. This is what drives that relationship with the customer, right? The functionality we just talked about, from a technical standpoint, I need to know if I push this button, this function is going to be performed each and every time, right? It should not be a variable response. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? We want to have a conditioned response. When I turn the key onto my car, I expect it to start, right? If it doesn't start, I assume it's broken. If someone pushes a button on your website and it doesn't work, they assume the website is broken, i.e. you are broken. They're not coming back. So aesthetics in that is what I see and where I see it, how it makes me feel, how I relate, right? I need to be able to access these. I need to know where things are. I need to easily be able to move from one page to the other. Or is it intuitive in this direction? If I push the button here that has, sequential buttons, I need to push this button here and the next button should be in the same area and it should be in the same area. I should not push a button here and then the next button, is in a corner somewhere else, right? So there are a lot of those things that in the marriage between aesthetics and functionality, they need to work well. They need to work well in sync. But again, they're not the same thing. Equally as important, right? I talked about cake, for example. Coming back to that, you eat first with your eyes, right? Before I put the cake, put the fork in the cake to eat it, I saw it with my eyes and it looked alluring. It looked delicious. And that's what brings me in, right? When I come to the website and it looks pleasing, it looks warm, it does not look cluttered. Things are where I expect them to be. I can find things easily. That's the aesthetics. And then of course, the functionality, back to the cake, is the taste, right? How does it actually work? If I get there and it looks nice, but it doesn't work, I'm out, right? If it looks nice, right, that's what brings me in. Because if it doesn't look nice, I'm not coming in. It looks nice, yes. I sit down and it works, yes, right? So those two things are extremely important, and make sure that, again, taking them separately, we're able to sync those appropriately, but understanding that they work, that they are different there. So the other thing is communicating with the customer. And this is extremely important, extremely important. Again, that phrase that the number one determinant of disappointment is expectations. If you have no expectations, you won't be disappointed. However, we all have expectations. Our customers have expectations, and their expectations are high. We've talked about their expectations with aesthetics. We've talked about their expectations with functionality, right? So those things primary to everything else, right? Once you take care of those, then you can move on to this. Obviously, you're not going to communicate if they're not a customer. You can't communicate to someone who's not here. So if you have not brought them in with the aesthetics, if you have not held them with the functionality, you can't communicate to them. But you can still lose them if you don't communicate properly to them, right? So managing the expectations. One of the first things is let me know what to expect. Right? If I'm opening an account, this is what I need to know, right? These are the three primary areas that we're going to go in. As a new customer, I need to create a profile. Tell me what that means, right? As a customer, I will set up my profile. and help me keep track of what I'm doing. The next step, I will complete the application. Tells me what I will require. I will require IDs, registration information, tax documents, and then finally, I can finalize the setup, the funding, the boarding, the acceptance of my account. But let me know what that is. Going in blind, you start feeling around, and it's really hard to manage the customer experience without understanding those pieces there. So again, another way to look at this, providing additional information, right? So in filling out the application, we often talk about that user experience based on facility and ease, and also time it takes to go through that. But a huge part of that is the preparation beforehand. If I start the application to open up the account and I don't have the necessary information, now we have created openings for abandonment. If I have to get up to go get my driver's license, if I have to get up to go get something because I didn't have it initially, you are creating an opportunity for them to leave and not come back. So letting them know before you start, this is what you'll need. So I can go gather those items here. And once I sit down, I flow through this very quickly. I have this, and in a matter of minutes, I am able to open up my account and get started. So telling them what to expect, right? In a composition of paper or even a presentation, there's those guidelines. Tell them what you're going to tell them, right? In the intro, tell them what you need to tell them, right? That's the body of it. And then tell them what you just told them, right? In the recap, in the summary of this. So intro, the body, in this. And the same thing, we're guiding our customers through that. They're knowing what to expect. I recently came off a family vacation, and in standing in line for a ride in an amusement park, it is easy for me to stand for 2 hours. Granted, I got a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old. It's easy to stand if I know how long I'm standing in line for. You'll see those places that do it well. From this point, it's 45 minutes. I know what to expect. From this point, it's 15 minutes. I know what to expect. I could be there and it may only be 10 minutes in line, but if I don't know what to expect, that 10 minutes can seem interminable, right? So those expectations were not managed. Again, if it's an hour and a half, at least I know that I can prepare and I can plan for it accordingly. So in this, as you prepare your customers, those best practices, communicate to them what to expect. You're going to fill out the application. Then you will accept your disclosures. And then from there, we will verify your identity. And then in finalizing, you'll fund the account. And here's the stuff that you need. And then as you go through that, we wanted to draw your attention to that process, right? At this point, you are 1/5 of the way through this, right? So go through this as we move through the process. I know how far I'm going in this. A little bit further on, I'm almost there. I'm 60% all the way in, right? Again, managing expectations. In the best practices in design, you'll also see, like for this that asks for information, it is not a best practice to list out, interminable 30 questions on a page. You want to take it in pieces, and you want to take it appropriately to move those, and then communicate to them as you're moving that. You could easily have a single scroll page that has all the information that goes down, but that is not a best practice. So take that and move that, and it's almost like you're checking off the to-do list. There's also a little bit of human satisfaction that comes in as I move from page to page. I know I'm accomplishing things and I'm almost there, right? They say you can eat an elephant as long as you take it one bite at a time, right? So in this, we're taking it in bits and pieces, one bite at a time, and moving that. Oh, excuse me there. So as we move through into the final stage here, a recap of what we just talked about, right? The most important thing in driving this is the philosophy of this, right? Take a step back and understand that we are in a digital world. You are not transferring your physical engagement into a digital one. It is a digital experience first, That is the primary experience. From there, you can back solve and reorient your uh, physical experience, your in-person experience, to supplement and benefit that. Or, some institutions have taken it in two lanes, right? In two speeds, understanding that the digital experience is primary and is different, and that they have an entirely different, in-person experience. I think, that, leaves a gap. They should be symbiotic, but understanding that the digital experience is the primary one. So consider that, map that out, look at what the entire experience looks like from start to finish, and make sure that, it works the way it should. The process design looks good, right? The aesthetic design looks good. And then, of course, going into that next one, the flawless functionality. There's no room for error. The margin for error is essentially zero, right? So you need to be able to make sure that when they experience this, when I click a button, it works. When I go to the next page, it loads. When I, perform a certain function, it is going to deliver what I expect it to deliver. And then again, considering that aesthetics and functionality are not the same thing. Aesthetics, I see first with my eyes, or I eat first with my eyes, right? So I see it first, and it tells me if this is an inviting place, is this is the place I want it to go, right? I buy wine often after I've decided which type of wine I want. By the label, I look at it. If they have taken the time to put together a good label, I would hope that they've also taken the time to make sure that the content inside works, right? But of course, to that second part, if I open the wine bottle and the wine is no good, I'm done there. I don't care how good the bottle looks. But that bottle, the aesthetics is what attracts me. The functionality is what keeps me. So that functionality needs to be flawless, and it needs to work in sync with the aesthetics as well. And then lastly, communicating with the customer, right? Manage their expectations. Let them know what to expect. If they finish there and it's going to be 48 hours before you communicate to them, let them know. Let them know it'll be 24 hours before someone comes back to them. Or let them know you will get an email within the next 72 hours to fund this, to accept this. But there's nothing worse than finishing and looking around and trying to figure out what happens next. Where do I go? What happens next there? That is a point where if you don't communicate well to the customer, all the work you've done with the aesthetics and the functionality to attract them, to keep them, you can then lose them by not communicating appropriately. So that gap between customer expectations and what we actually deliver, it needs to be closed. You need to have a very straight line between the expectations and the experience, and that bridge is bridged by how you communicate to your customer. So those are the big takeaways in this. In this digital world, there is very little room for error. So making sure that our functionality, that we deliver those extremely well. It looks the way it should, right? Aesthetically, we've done the work there. There are best practices in the user interface. That can be its own separate webinar, from a design folks. And then again, communicating with the customer. That is that last part. That is how you manage and maintain the relationship with that. All right, so we've come to pretty much the end of it here. And we do have a few questions from this. So first question, of course, right? The slide deck will be made available. And, we'll be able to look at this and utilize this as well. Another question was, for commercial account opening, can you discuss at what point and how the required documents will be communicated to the applicant? Great question, right? So it depends on the institution. Typically, the best practice would be at the front end, right? As you saw in the screenshot that I had there, before I get started, I need to know what to have available. right? Imagine, I talk about the physical experience. Imagine if I got up and had to go to the bank in person, and I realized I didn't have some documents, then I have to go home, either come back the same day or come back another day, right? Part of the hook there is maybe I've already started, but that is such a negative experience. I may just leave it and not come back. The difference in the digital one is the ease of moving to another option. There is no hurdle to move through that. Just as easily I can open up one bank's website, I can do that here. So the ability to retain them and hold them is very low. So being able to make sure that once I get started, I can move through this process in one sitting, that's the ideal. And you do that first by communicating to the customer. So I don't need to get started and start moving in there. And maybe the third step into the process, I then realize that I need some information that I don't have. It's best done at the front end of it. And again, if I go back to this page here, right, I need to know, and you need to communicate what I need in order to complete this process. And in the event that I may need to get additional information that I don't have, a supplement, need to make it easy for them to provide that, whether it's a save and finish, save and resume, those things are part of it. All right, other additional questions? I know we have a couple more minutes here. Okay, so another question actually had to deal with the back end of things. We talked about the functionality pieces of it. Now, in building an account opening, if I go back to, you guys follow me here. If I go back to this, now the complexity of a commercial account opening is the various moving parts in this. From a customer standpoint, I need to be able to sit down and drive through this as frictionless as possible. In order to do that, the bank must make sure they build out that workflow and those processes and the tools that need to be integrated in order to drive this frictionless and seamless. And in order to do this, often it means integrating with different third-party providers, right? If I needed to stop a process because I need to physically go do a background check, I need to make phone calls, or I need to submit this separately, that's a gap. If I need to resend information via email back and forth, or if I need to send stuff through, even, for example, DocuSign, where they have to leave this and sign into DocuSign and then come back, rather than that being embedded and integrated in the process, that's a gap and that's a hurdle, that's friction, right? So you want to be able to create that integrated process. So on the user end, what I see and what I experience is a very smooth and streamlined process from the customer. And that also gives the bank the ability to extend its own capabilities. Often you will have credit card providers or services from another entity, rather than having to finish opening this account and then go opt into credit cards. Those should be integrated into the process. So as I'm going through this, I can make the selection to add credit cards. I can make the selection to add certain services rather than having to be redirected in order to accomplish that.
We have one more question, Chuck.
Sure.
It says, is your software solution set up to recognize if the customer creates the business profile by corporate entity type, what documents would be required?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, right? And that harkens back to that design element of it. Dynamically, these should be part of it, right? If I am selecting a business and I indicate that this is an LLC, the required documents that should, pull up would be those relative to the LLC, the articles of organization, the articles, as opposed to if it was a C Corp, the articles of incorporation. So dynamically, that's the way it's designed, right? If even on some other elements where, let's say, I offer certain products to customers by tiers, right? Tiers of revenue. So for a commercial entity that generates over $1 million in revenue, we have these products. Or those that generate under $500,000, we offer these products. Or even by geography. So those things are part of the dynamic end of this. So as a customer, I don't have to sit and sort through, but in my journey, it is tailored dynamically based on the inputs and the characteristics that I have as an entity, as a business, as an individual.
Right. Great.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time out to listen to this. Now, the takeaways on this from a principle is, these should be the guiding principles in designing this. As you look at this and consider this account opening process, the digital account opening process, what it needs to be, start with those principles and then define and hold up what you're doing in your design against those principles. For more information, please, you will get the slide deck. You will get a recording on this. If you want to talk more about how ProcessMaker can help you design this process, also how ProcessMaker can provide you with an out-of-the-box solution with these best practices designed and built, pre-built already. I would love to sit there and talk with y'all and look at what is best for your institution.
Great. Thank you so much, Chuck. You did an amazing job today. You provided a lot of great information. And just want to thank you for your time and thank you everybody who joined us today. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.